Now, some movies are classics, some are disasters, and then you've got movies like Second Sight, where half the fun is trying to figure out how they thought all these random ingredients looked so good before they got thrown into the oven. You've got John Larroquette, who at this point was already killing it on Night Court, and then you had Bronson Pinchot, who was another of the big sitcom faces from the era thanks to Perfect Strangers, and somebody looked at that combination and said, you know what people need? A supernatural detective comedy with these two dudes running around Boston delivering hijinks. And honestly, I kind of get it. That's exactly the kind of pitch that would have gotten my attention on a rental shelf, and it absolutely did when I was a kid, because I was all over this movie. Big title, recognizable faces, a weird concept, and just enough confidence to end up making itself a strange little hidden gem that nobody talks about anymore. Instead, what you get is something much messier than that, but also in its own little way, kind of more fun as a result. So today we're talking about a movie that I think absolutely belongs in the rental rack rejects aisle. It's Second Sight from 1989. What's up out there, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is Sunset Video, where the open sign's always glowing, the staff picks wall is always stocked, and the conversation at the counter is usually the best part of the journey. This is Rental Rack Rejects, the series where we talk about the blatantly bad movies that we still can't help but having a soft spot for. These are the weird ones, the sloppy ones, the bargain bin beauties, the movies that may not fully work, but still leave behind just enough charm, chaos, or late night cable energy to stay stuck in my head at least. So with that said, let's get into the comedic chaos that is Second Sight. Now, something all movies that are certified for reject status have in common is their box art bait, and this movie really does have it. Second Sight is a strong title. It sounds slick, mysterious. It sounds like maybe you're about to get some cool little paranormal mystery or supernatural comedy with a fun gimmick, and then you see the cast: John Larroquette, Bronson Pinchot, Bess Armstrong, and Stuart Pankin, which really is a lineup that's built to make you stop and think, okay, this could be something.
Bobby, does
anyone think that these...
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna... Oh, shut up.
And then you get to the setup, which is honestly not that bad either. Larroquette plays Wilbur Wills, a private detective. Pinchot plays Bobby McGee, his psychic partner, and together they get wrapped up in this kidnapping case involving a Catholic cardinal. So in retrospect, it's a purely specific, highly goofy, late 80s studio comedy premise that you kind of want to work just on principle alone. And really, I think that's what sells it. Not just the absurd premise, but the pairing overall, because Larroquette and Pinchot were coming into this movie with two completely different sitcom flavors. Larroquette was bringing that dry, smart, slightly exasperated rhythm that he thrived on, and Pinchot delivered the full-throttle, elastic chaos that warmed audiences' hearts every Friday night on Perfect Strangers. So right away, the movie promises a clash of creative styles that feels like it should be able to create some real comical sparks, and that is the bait. And then we get to the big idea, and this is where I actually think the movie is onto something. Now, the central concept, I think, is solid enough. Odd couple detective team, one guy is grounded, the other guy is psychic. Throw them into a kidnapping case, mix in some supernatural weirdness, some city chaos, and just let the cast do the rest. That should absolutely work.
We are witnessing a case of spontaneous psychic teletransportation. Not at all dangerous.
And the reason it feels like it could work is because of Larroquette and Pinchot. Larroquette is the kind of actor who can just anchor a broad comedy without looking like he's trying too hard. I think that's what kind of made him so effective on Night Court. He could play smug, frustrated, irritated, and amused all at once. Pinchot, meanwhile, had already built a whole TV identity around a big character comedy and full body eccentricities on Perfect Strangers. So the idea of putting these two energies together was actually kind of smart for a movie.
Hey! Will, your blood pressure is way up.
Oh, do tell.
Now, the movie's real problem is that it never quite figures out how to balance them. It knows that this pairing is the engine that drives the truck, but it also doesn't really know what road to put that truck on. Is this a buddy comedy, a paranormal farce, a weird detective movie, a chase movie, a cartoon with real people in it? Well, the answer is mostly yes to all of these in certain segments, and that's where the wobbling in this movie starts. Now we get to the Wreckage, and this is where the movie really earns its spot in the reject pile because despite its questionable charms, Second Sight is an undeniable mess. The tone is all over the place, the pacing is strange, and scenes don't really build from one to the next so much as they kind of tumble into one another for 83 minutes. The whole movie just kind of has that familiar rental rack feeling where the movie keeps moving because it knows if it slows down, you might start asking questions that nobody on set wanted brought up. But the most fascinating part of the Wreckage is the Larroquette Pinchot contrast, because in this one, Larroquette feels like he's trying to play a movie star version of the normal guy in an abnormal situation. He's trying to keep the thing tethered. He's giving the movie kind of a center of gravity, and you can feel him working to make the premise play. And in a weird way, he almost approaches this thing like he's in a more traditional studio comedy.
When the soul is pure, the eyes are windows. Wills.
Karen.
I know.
Pinchot, on the other hand, is doing something else entirely. He's not just turned up, he's turned inside out. And I do say that affectionately because I will admit he is a huge reason why this movie is memorable at all, but he's operating on such a different comedic wavelength that the movie starts to feel like two competing sitcom energies got trapped in the same feature film. Larroquette is trying to steer, and Pinchot is hanging out the passenger side window yelling at the paranormal, all while Pankin and Armstrong attempt to kind of shoehorn in a small resemblance of normalcy. And honestly, that clash kind of becomes the movie. You can almost imagine a better version of this where Larroquette's dry delivery and Pinchot's hyperactive weirdness managed to lock in perfectly. Instead, they kind of scrape against one another. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's exhausting, and sometimes it feels like the whole movie is just being pulled in opposite directions by two very talented comedic stars doing two completely different things. So that is the Wreckage. Now this is where we get to the charm, because for all the movie's problems, this Larroquette Pinchot pairing is also the reason it still has some life all these years later. I think Larroquette gives the movie a baseline of professionalism and comic rhythm. Even when the material is all over the place, he at least makes it feel like somebody here showed up with a game plan. There was just, I think, something very watchable about him in this era too. He just had that mix of confidence and dryness and low-key irritation that worked so well on TV, and I think here he does give the film a little bit of structure whenever things start floating away. And then of course Pinchot just brings the exact opposite energy, which, to be fair, is part of the attraction in a movie like this, because Second Sight is not a story about polished winners. This is about lovable odd couple Wreckage, and Pinchot brings the Wreckage. Big, loud, oddly committed Wreckage. He attacks this role with the kind of enthusiasm that will either sink the movie or keep it from becoming forgettable. In this case, maybe a little bit of both. And honestly, I kind of love that about this movie, because if Larroquette is the guy trying to keep the party in order, then that means Pinchot is the reason the party is wild and memorable in the first place. And that combination may not make for a traditionally good movie, but it definitely gives Second Sight a personality. And for pure rental rack oddity, personality can go a long way. And then there's the Cult Residue. Now, Second Sight was not a hit. In fact, it was a critical and financial failure to no surprise, and almost instantly forgotten if remembered at all. Now, there was no budget listing for this one that I could track down. However, if you look back and you consider Lorimer's common shooting budgets for mid-tier studio comedies during this time, you could assume it was somewhere in that $8 to $12 million range. It would open in early November of 1989 to take the 5th spot with a $2.2 million weekend, but it would only get a 2-week theatrical window, topping out at $5.4 million. So not stellar numbers at all. Critically, to no surprise, reviews landed mostly on the negative side for this one. Janet Maslin, in her write-up for the New York Times, referred to Zwick's direction as maladroit. I had to look that up, and it means ineffective, clumsy, or bungling. So essentially, she's basically trying to say the movie tripped over itself, but she's wanting to say it with the appearance of wearing a monocle and snacking on fine caviar. Now, with a more community college vibe to his review, Hal Henson over at the Washington Post took aim at the broadness and bargain basement feel of the plot, which honestly makes more sense when you're looking back at this movie.
And don't tune in on your thoughts, because you hate that. Yes.
Regardless, this is exactly the kind of movie that could still linger in the memory banks anyways, not because it secretly worked or was misunderstood genius, but because it had recognizable faces, a weird, wild premise, and just enough late 80s studio comedy energy to make people remember something about it. Maybe they remember Larroquette from Night Court and seeing him in an odd little movie that never gets mentioned along with his other notable big screen comedies, or maybe they remember Pinchot and think, wait, what was that weird comedy he did where his body swung around on his toes? Or maybe they just remember the title and the box art and have that vague sense that the movie was on cable at some strange hour once upon a time. And to me, that kind of half memory really is its own form of VHS era afterlife. And honestly, for a movie like Second Sight, I think that certainly counts.
I am standing in a sewer in mortal fear that somebody in the neighborhood's gonna flush.
Bobby, you getting anything?
No.
Before we hand down the final reject status for this movie, here's the quickest way to sum up why Second Sight both works and doesn't work at the same time. It's great rental shelf bait. The cover, title, cast, and premise are exactly the kind of combination that would make you stop and think that this could potentially be a hidden cable era gem. I think Larroquette gives it structure. His dry, grounded comedic rhythm, I think, keeps the movie from completely floating off into ultra nonsense, and I think Pinchot comes in to make it memorable. I mean, even when he's operating on a totally different wavelength, I think his full tilt weirdness just gives the movie more personality. I also think this one just has that genuine late 80s oddball charm, and as a sloppy studio curiosity, I think it just leaves behind the exact kind of VHS era residue that the series was built for. On the other hand, the tone is all over the place. It never fully decides whether it wants to be a buddy comedy, a paranormal farce, a detective movie, or a live-action cartoon. It tries to be a little bit of all of that, so the pacing is clumsy. Scenes kind of feel like they tumble into one another instead of building solid momentum, and the premise, I think, is better than the execution. The core idea here is solid, but I don't think the movie ever finds the sharpest version of itself. And I think the lead dynamic overall ends up being uneven. Larroquette and Pinchot are interesting together, but they often feel like they're performing in two completely different movies. So that brings us to this movie's reject status. Now, is Second Sight a good movie? No, not really. Does it waste a pretty fun concept? A little bit, yeah. Does it fully know how to use two major sitcom personalities at the height of their TV fame? Definitely not. However, is there still something fun about watching John Larroquette try to hold the center while Bronson Pinchot turns the entire movie into a psychic riot? Absolutely. So for me, Second Sight earns VHS fever dream reject status. Because this is the kind of movie that you rented for the cast, you kept watching for the wild chaos, and you remember years later mostly as this very strange collision of late 80s TV energy on the big screen, and honestly, that's plenty enough to earn a permanent place in the rental rack rejects aisle of Sunset Video. Now, before you guys pop out, if you did enjoy this trip through the bargain bin wilderness section of the video store and you want more retro movie talk, you can check out my forgotten 80s movie series for those overlooked titles from the decade, or my 90s B-action movie series for even more VHS era chaos, lovable junk, and beautiful scrappy movie madness. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to drop it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. I always have a video coming right around the corner for you guys. I hope to see you all back for that next one. And until then, I want you to remember, movies never say die.
Jack Burton and the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?